Well, good morning. Today is Wednesday, December the 3rd, and today we are in Luke's Gospel, chapter 12. We're going to be looking today at verses 13 through 34. So, where God says, someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." But he said to him, "Man, who made me a judge or arbitrator over you?" And he said to them, "Take care and be on your guard against all covetousness. For one's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions." And he told them a parable, saying, "The land of a rich man produced plentifully. And he thought to himself, 'What shall I do? For I have nowhere to store my crops.' And he said, 'I will do this. I will tear down my barns and build larger ones. And there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, Soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, and be merry.' But God said to him, 'Fool, this night your soul will be required of you. And the things you have prepared, whose will they be? So is the one who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich towards God.' And he said to his disciples, 'Therefore I tell you, do not be anxious for your life, what you will eat, nor about your body, what you will put on. For life is more than food, and the body more than clothing. Consider the ravens. They neither sow nor reap. They have neither storehouse nor barn, and yet God feeds them. Of how much more value are you than the birds? And which of you, by being anxious, can add a single hour to his span of life? If then you are not able to do as small a thing as that, why are you anxious about the rest? Consider the lilies, how they grow. They neither toil nor spin. Yet I tell you, even Solomon, in all his glory, was not arrayed like one of these. But if God so clothes the grass, which is alive in the field today, and tomorrow is thrown into the oven, how much more will he clothe you, O you of little faith? And do not seek what you are to eat or what you are to drink, nor be worried. For all the nations of the world seek after these things, and your Father knows that you need them. Instead, seek his kingdom, and these things will be added to you. Fear not, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Sell your possessions and give to the needy. Provide yourself with money bags that do not grow old, with a treasure in the heavens that does not fail, and no moth destroys. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also." So, Jesus is approached by someone who apparently his father has died and left an inheritance, and this brother has an older brother, I guess, who's in line to inherit everything, and he wants his brother to divide the inheritance. And so he asks Jesus to tell his brother to share. And Jesus responds, why should I be an arbitrator here? Why would I involve myself with this? And then he gives a warning against covetousness. And he tells this parable about the man who owned land, and he prospered and had more than he could more than he could use, and so he tears down his barns to build bigger barns so he can save more, so that he can eat, drink, and be merry the rest of his life. And then God says he was a fool, because that night he died. And who will spend his wealth? Jesus says, instead, if you're wise, you won't worry about food or clothing. If you're wise, you'll worry about the next life, laying up treasure there. Again, the priority is on the next life, not this one. So, as we look at this, he says to sell your worldly possessions, invest in people. That's essentially what Jesus is saying. Invest your life in others. Invest your life in the souls of men. The souls of men are eternal. All these other material things, he refers to the flowers that are so beautiful. He said it's like grass that's here one minute and then thrown in the fire the next. That's life. Life is fleeting. Book of James says life is like a vapor, here 1 second, gone the next. So we're to invest in eternal things. Someone has said that the only two things in this world that are eternal are the Word of God and the souls of men. Everything else is going to be laid waste. Every tree dies, every building falls into decay and eventually collapses. Every institution fails. But the Word of God endures forever. And the souls of men endure forever in one of two places, heaven or hell. Jesus said, lay up your treasure in heaven, where moth cannot destroy and thief cannot steal. So what's the application of this passage? As we look at the SPECT, S-P-E-C-T, and ask the questions, S, is there any sin for me to forsake? The sin that he's addressing here is covetousness. The love of things, the love of money. God knows what we need. God knows we need shelter from the storm. We need clothes on our back. We need food on the table. God knows we need those things. We ought to trust God and not worry about them. There's such a fine line. Sometimes it's difficult to know what's just normal living and what's living beyond our means. I mean, I have been told, and I've seen poverty. I've been to nations, Malawi, for instance, in Africa. At the time I was there, was ranked the second poorest nation in the world. So I've seen life in those villages where there's no clean water, where the shelters are barely adequate. And by those standards, I would consider myself wealthy. But here in our culture, in our society, I'm somewhere in the middle. So, do I sell everything, give it to somebody else? That would be foolish. But what's the principle here? Yes, I'm to avoid covetousness and the love of money. When is enough? I must learn to be satisfied and content. Word of God says, godliness with contentment is great gain. So at what point do we learn to be content and not desire more? I think that is, at least seems to be the case, as I grow older, I realize the true things that are important. This past Christmas, of course, I had just had a stroke. And so I was just thankful to be alive. But as I sat around the Christmas tree opening presents and watching my grandchildren and having my daughters there, my son-in-law, and my wife, I realized how rich I am. I was reminded, even when I was in the hospital, how rich I am, as I had so many people come by to visit and text me and pray for me all over the world. I realized that the true riches of life are the relationships that we have. The relationships that we have with others.